So let's get started talking a little bit about the STAR method. So what is behavioral interviewing? Behavioral interviewing is a technique used by interviewers to evaluate your past behavior in order to predict your future behavior in a particular situation. And so what employers are doing is they're trying to figure out, there are certain behaviors that they value. They're looking for people that have these types of experiences, and they're trying to see, would you be able to show us a way that you have used these skills and behaviors in the past that we think would be beneficial to this particular position. Sometimes people will see behavioral interviewing questions in a first interview, second interview, an internship interview. They can really pop up at any time. And so how can you first recognize, behavioral question, right? Some employers will say, we're going to schedule a behavioral interview. They often won't title it that when they're talking to candidates. So you want to know when they're asking you a question, this is a time I need to use the STAR method. So these are some of the ways that you might hear a behavioral question start off. About a time, describe an experience in which, give me an example of a time when, walk me through the steps that you have taken when. And so when you hear questions that start like this, you think, okay, this is when I may need to utilize the STAR method. So why is it that employers tend to use these types of questions, right? So it is a way for them to really objectively evaluate and compare candidates, even those with different skills and backgrounds. They could be interviewing multiple people for the same position. Some people have different kinds of degrees, different kinds of internship or job experience. But if they ask them all the same kinds of questions, they can really be a little bit more objective about their interviewing and how they're evaluating candidates. They often have identified specific skills that they think are needed and important for the role, and they're trying to evaluate, have you demonstrated these types of experiences in the past? The other thing is that sometimes they may implement these types of questions because it can actually help you as a candidate give some insight into the realities of the job. And so ultimately, when an employer is interviewing people and offering them the job, they want someone who's excited about the job, who's interested in the types of skills that would be utilized. And so this can give you some insight into what this might be like. If you, as a candidate, can demonstrate in an interview the types of behaviors that they want to see in the future, it's a good prediction that you'll do that in the future. So when you're thinking a little bit about how you're going to go about answering these types of questions, what is it that you want to make sure that you are including? The first is really verifiable and concrete evidence how you've dealt with issues and situations in the past. So you don't want to manufacture something. You don't want to be speculative. You really want to be drawing on your previous experiences, and we'll talk in a minute about what types of experiences you could draw from as a basis to answer these types of questions. But you really want them to be concrete evidence in the past, how you've dealt with certain types of situations. They really need to be specific examples, not generalizations, not to say, well, if faced with this type of situation, this is what I would do. You want to say, well, this is an example of where I was faced with this situation, and here's what I did do. So not generalizations, not speculative, really specific examples. And you really want to think about, from the research that you've done ahead of time, what type of skills and experiences are really relevant to the position that you think would be important based on the job description, based on some of the homework that you've done. And so you really want to think about, are there ways in which you might be able to demonstrate some of the skills and experiences relevant to the position in the way in which you're answering? So if you know that, for instance, R or Python is a really important skill that they're looking for, you might think a little bit about your experiences and think about, is there an example that you can provide from your past that showcases your R or Python experience, since you know that's something that's important to them. So the STAR method, STAR stands for situation, task, action, and results. First, situation. Think of a situation in which you were involved that had a positive outcome. You do want to be able to show some of the positive skills and positive experiences that you've had in the past. Task. Describe the tasks involved in the situation. Action. Specify what actions you took in the situation to complete the tasks and achieve results. And then results, what positive results followed due to your actions. I will tell you that very often when people are asked behavioral questions in mock interviews with me, they tend to jump right to the action. And you really have to first get through the situation and the task. You have to remember that most of the time When an employer is conducting an interview with you, they only have the information you've provided to them through your resume. And so if you just jump right into the action that you took, they're confused. They don't know exactly where you are. You really need to start with the situation, really accurately describe the situation in which you're about to present. Then what was the task? What was it that you actually had to do in this situation? The action, what did you do? And then the result, what results followed due to your actions? Many people fail to set the situation up appropriately. And I'm not necessarily feeling that that's the one you need to spend the most time on. I think actually the most time is probably in the action, like you're really illustrating what you did. But what I often see people do, because they're afraid of being too wordy, is breeze over the situation very quickly, breeze over the task and get right to the action. And then what happens is the employer who's asking the question is a little bit confused, like, where are you? Why are you doing these types of things that you're doing? What you're doing sounds interesting, but I'm not sure why you're doing them. And so it does take time to answer these types of questions. And I really think devoting a couple of moments to really adequately describe the situation can really provide the framework for moving forward. So how can you start preparing for this a little bit? Before the interview, you really need to think a little bit about the skills that you think are needed. And again, thinking about experiences in which you might be able to demonstrate these types of skills. And a lot of people feel as if, well, I'm applying for an internship. I don't have a lot of work experience. What is it that I can talk about? The experiences and the situations that you're describing don't necessarily have to be big, right? They don't have to be full-time jobs or internships with big name employers. You can really draw from all kinds of relevant experiences that you might have. Think about classes. Did you have any group projects that you worked on in which you might be able to describe some situations and skills that you've showcased? Internships and jobs, certainly. Also leadership positions and activities. What types of organizations are you involved with at Penn? Student groups, professional organizations. If you are a recent college graduate, you could draw from undergraduate leadership experiences as well. And think a little bit about how they can be related to the position. So they don't necessarily have to be big earth-shattering experiences and situations that you're drawing from. They just really want to be ones in which you can demonstrate the types of skills and experiences that you think they're looking for. And you really want to identify your 3 to 5 top selling points. So before anyone has an interview, whether it's behavioral or not, I always think about what are 3 to 5 things that you really want an employer to know about you that you think would be helpful to them. And again, you want to structure your answers to questions utilizing those types of things. So talk a little bit about star stories. Thinking a little bit about how can you think about your past so that when you're asked these behavioral questions, you have some ideas in your back pocket about ways that you can approach this. You really want to research ahead of time. What is it about you that you think is relevant to an employer? Brainstorming these types of experiences that you have. Many behavioral questions are getting after things like teamwork abilities, initiative, planning, leadership, commitment, problem-solving skills. You want to think a little bit about stories. Trying to keep the stories as relevant to the position as possible. Again, so showcasing those types of experiences that might make you really well qualified for the position. Think also about examples when results were different than expected. So you definitely may get questions about, tell me about a time when something didn't go as planned. How did you approach it? Learning from past experiences is really helpful. You want to practice the stories, but not to the point of memorization. We in Career Services do a lot of mock interviews, and a lot of students really want to prepare very specifically answers to questions that they think will be asked by employers. And this doesn't work for a variety of reasons, the biggest one of which is you will inevitably be asked a question that you aren't exactly prepared for, and then you're frozen because you're not quite ready. So you don't want to memorize. I do think bullet pointing out a few things that you would want to share. So if you go through your resume, one of the mistakes that I see a lot of students make is you spend so much time putting your resume together when you're applying to a job, and then people forget to look at it before they actually go to the interview. And you have to remember that that's really many times the basis of their understanding of you is what documents you've sent them. To really review that resume and take a look at some of the experiences that you had. Again, drawing from a wide range of different types of experiences, outside the classroom, inside the classroom, professional opportunities that you've had, and maybe bullet out a few experiences that you might have thought of. So bullet points, I think, are better than people who are tempted to sort of write out a script that they're going to memorize. So first of all, bullet pointing, what behaviors do you think you could draw from that particular experience? So again, looking at this top bullet point, teamwork, initiative, etc., what types of behaviors do you think you might be able to illustrate from that experience? And then maybe thinking about individual situations that you might be able to explain. So for instance, if you have a leadership experience on campus in which you were leading a group of people and you put on a conference, the conference might be one of the situations that you could think about. Where could I draw some of these behaviors that I'm looking for? So I do think kind of bullet pointing and looking at things ahead of time is really helpful. The other thing is to make sure that if you're going to draw from previous experiences, that they show up on your resume. So sometimes I'll conduct a mock interview with someone and they talk about an experience that I think is relevant, and then I realize it's not even on their resume. So making sure that you're talking about things that the employer may have some basis of understanding is always helpful as well. One other thing that I've noticed in some of the mock interviews that I've done recently is some students have a tendency to continually return to the same example or to the same experience, right? So if you were a leader of a consulting group on campus and you're interviewing with a consulting firm, feeling like you need to keep returning to this consulting experience to demonstrate the behaviors. You don't really necessarily have to do that. You can demonstrate these behaviors in a variety of different ways, and to keep it interesting for the employer, different types of experiences to highlight are a good idea. Quantify when possible. Anytime that you can assign a number, a value, showing improvement in something, cost savings, anything that you can do to show numbers is always helpful. And you really want to be honest. Don't manufacture situations from your past. You can run into a great deal of trouble if an employer identifies that you've been a little bit less than honest in some of the examples that you've provided. One of the ways that you can really practice on your own that I think is excellent is Big Interview. Big Interview is a tool that Career Services has, and it allows you to do a couple of different things. It actually has some learning modules that you can do to learn, sort of like a little course that you can take about interviewing. It also has a practice tool. And so what you can do is you can select the type of interview, the industry, and you can also indicate the level of difficulty, right? Are you just getting started, kind of mid-range difficulty, or do you really want challenging questions? It will pop up with a video of a person asking you questions. It is unfortunately not live, it is recorded, and it will record your responses back. You can record your own responses and you can watch them yourself, share them with a friend. So this is a great way to get started. Let me show you a few other tools, a couple of resources that I think are really helpful for you. We have a Canvas interviewing course. There's actually 3 Canvas courses that we have: resumes, networking, and interviewing. That can be really helpful if you're just getting started. We have an excellent interviewing guide for graduate students and postdocs, which is a pretty extensive PDF, which really walks you through ways in which you want to prepare, things to think about during interviewing. And we have an entire website devoted to interview resources with lots and lots of videos and links to external resources that I think are helpful. And the final thing is to schedule an appointment. If you have an interview scheduled, you are welcome to schedule a mock interview. And I do think that Big Interview is an excellent tool that you can be using at all stages of preparation.